While town residents believed it was nothing more than faded military paperwork, Elena Reeves knew this wasn't just another yellowed document from a forgotten war. The intricate topographical map she'd uncovered in the dusty corners of her farmhouse attic would lead her to a discovery that would transform not only her struggling reality as a single mother, but potentially reshape American military history and modern national security protocols. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through the grime-covered dormer windows of the attic, illuminating swirling dust particles and casting long shadows across the uneven wooden floorboards. Elena Reeves pushed a strand of dark hair from her face, leaving a smudge of dust across her forehead. At 38, the fine lines around her eyes told the story of a woman who had weathered more storms than most, raising 2 children alone, after her husband's death in a military training accident 6 years ago. The old Mapleton farmhouse had been in her husband's family for generations, dating back to 1895, when the first Reeves had established the property as a modest dairy operation in the rolling hills of western Pennsylvania. Elena had never planned on managing the place alone, but life had a way of rewriting even the most carefully crafted plans. Today had begun like any other on the increasingly challenging homestead. Elena had risen before dawn, prepared breakfast for her children. 13-year-old Chloe and 10-year-old Mason helped them catch the school bus, and then turned her attention to the endless list of repairs the aging farmhouse constantly demanded. "Just need to find something worth selling before winter sets in," she murmured to herself, wiping sweat from her brow despite the October chill. The property taxes were due in less than a month, and her substitute teaching income barely covered their basic living expenses, let alone the mounting costs of maintaining a century-old farmhouse. Her sister-in-law, Jennifer, had been gently but persistently suggesting that Elena consider selling the property and moving closer to Pittsburgh, where more teaching positions were available and the children would have better educational opportunities. "Jason wouldn't want you struggling like this," Jennifer had said during their last phone call, her concern genuine, but her words stinging nonetheless. The mere thought of selling made Elena's chest tighten. The farmhouse, with all its flaws and constant needs, was the last tangible connection her children had to their father. It was where he had grown up, where he had carved their names into the massive oak tree in the backyard, and where his presence still lingered in the familiar creaks of the floorboards and the workshop that remained exactly as he had left it. Today, however, Elena's focus was on a more practical concern: the water damage spreading across the ceiling in Mason's bedroom. The recent heavy rains had revealed yet another leak in the aging roof, and Elena had reluctantly climbed into the attic to assess the damage before calling a roofer she couldn't really afford. "Should have taken care of this last spring," she muttered, carefully navigating the narrow boards laid across the ceiling joists. The flashlight in her hand revealed water stains spreading from a section of roof where several shingles had likely been damaged in the last thunderstorm. The repair would cost at least a few $100s they didn't have, forcing Eleanor to once again dip into the dwindling emergency fund her husband's military life insurance had provided. As she examined the damaged area more closely, her flashlight beam caught something unusual tucked between 2 roof beams, a dark, cylindrical container that seemed out of place among the Christmas decorations and forgotten furniture that populated the attic space. Curiosity momentarily overrode her concern about the leaking roof. Elena carefully made her way toward the object, assuming it was probably just another family heirloom or keepsake that Jason had stored away. The metal tube was about 18 inches long, its surface coated with decades of dust, but otherwise remarkably preserved. A screw-on cap sealed one end, and as Eleanor turned it in her hands, she noticed a series of numbers etched into the metal, followed by the letters U.S. A-O-I. "What in the world?" she whispered, carefully unscrewing the cap. It opened with surprising ease, as if it had been designed for preservation. Inside, she found a rolled document, protected by a waxy inner lining. With careful fingers, Elena extracted the contents and unrolled what appeared to be a detailed topographical map, remarkably well preserved despite its obvious age. The map showed a mountainous region she didn't immediately recognize, with elevation marks, water features, and a series of unusual symbols scattered across specific locations. Various sites were marked with geometric shapes, triangles, squares, and circles, each accompanied by numerical sequences and cryptic notations. In the corner, partially faded but still legible, was a date, March 1942. Elena carefully laid the map flat on the dusty attic floor, her roof repair completely forgotten. The document appeared to be a military map from World War II, but unlike any she had seen in history books or her late husband's military memorabilia, the level of detail was extraordinary, with handwritten notes in the margins written in what appeared to be some form of code. Most intriguing were 7 locations, marked with red X's, forming a deliberate pattern across a mountain range. At the bottom of the map, written in precise block lettering, was a message that made Elena's pulse quicken. "The 7 stations guard the path to Manhattan's shadow. What remains hidden must stay concealed." "Mom?" Chloe's voice called from the bottom of the attic stairs. "We're home from school. Where are you?" Elena carefully rolled the map and slipped it back into its protective tube. "Up in the attic, honey. I'll be right down," she called back, suddenly reluctant to share her discovery with her children. It wasn't that she kept secrets from them, but something about the map felt important, perhaps even sensitive, and she wanted to understand it better before involving anyone else. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That evening, after the children had finished their homework and gone to bed, Elena spread the map across the kitchen table, using the stronger light to examine it more closely. She took photos with her phone, then searched online for information about World War II military maps and the possible meaning of USAOI. Her search yielded little beyond general information about military cartography until she came across a reference to the U.S. Army Office of Intelligence, a World War II-era designation that preceded the modern military intelligence structure. "This could be an actual intelligence document," Elena murmured, excitement and unease mingling as she considered the implications. If the map was genuine, why had it been hidden in her farmhouse attic? And what was the Manhattan reference? And its shadow? A sudden connection made her sit up straighter. The Manhattan Project, the top-secret program that had developed the atomic bomb during World War II. Everyone knew about that, but what would a map related to the Manhattan Project be doing in her attic? Elena's late husband, Jason, had served in military intelligence before his accident, and his father before him had been a career army officer who served during the Cold War. Could one of them have brought this document home? If so, why? And more. Importantly, was it still classified information that she shouldn't possess? The questions multiplied as Elena studied the 7 marked locations more carefully. Based on the topography and certain labeled features, she was increasingly convinced the map showed a region somewhere in the southwestern United States, possibly New Mexico or Arizona, where much of the early atomic research had been conducted. Producing and narrating complex historical videos like this requires extensive research and careful editing. If you're finding value in Elena's unexpected journey, please consider subscribing. It truly helps us continue bringing these fascinating historical revelations to light. Now let's return to the mysterious map and its implications. Elena's hands trembled slightly as the pieces began to align in her mind. The farmhouse had been purchased by Jason's grandfather in 1948, just after World War II and during the early years of the Cold War. According to family stories, grandfather William Reeves had served in a special assignment during the war, though he had never discussed the details, even with family. Could William Reeves have been involved with the Manhattan Project or some related program? The timeline would fit, and it would explain why such a sensitive document had ended up in their attic, perhaps hidden away due to its classified nature and then forgotten over the decades. As the clock ticked past midnight, Elena's exhaustion finally overcame her curiosity. She carefully returned the map to its protective tube and hid it in her bedroom closet before finally getting some sleep. Her dreams were troubled, filled with images of mountains, secret facilities, and government agents knocking at her door. The following morning, after sending the children off to school, Elena called in sick to her substitute teaching assignment. The map's discovery had awakened something in her, a mystery connected to her husband's family that demanded further investigation before she decided what to do. Her first call was to Professor Alan Mercer at the local community college. As a history instructor specializing in American military history, he might recognize the map's significance without Elena having to reveal too much information. "Elena, what a pleasant surprise!" Professor Mercer greeted her warmly over the phone. The kindly professor had been a source of support after Jason's death, helping Chloe with history projects and occasionally stopping by the farm to check on the family. "I've found something that might interest you professionally," Elena explained carefully. "An old military map from the 1940s. I was wondering if you might help me understand its significance." "Certainly," Mercer agreed readily. "I'm between classes until 2 o'clock. Would you like to bring it by my office?" Elena hesitated, suddenly protective of the document. "Actually, I was hoping you might come to the farm instead. It's rather fragile, and I'd prefer not to transport it unnecessarily." If Professor Mercer found her request unusual, he didn't say so. "I can stop by around 3 after my last class." The hours until the professor's arrival seemed to crawl by. Elena spent them researching the Manhattan Project, carefully examining the map again, and deliberating about how much to share with Mercer. She didn't know why she felt so cautious. The document was over 80 years old after all, but something about the warning at the bottom of the map kept her on edge. At precisely 3 o'clock, Professor Mercer's aging Volvo pulled up the long gravel driveway. Elena welcomed him into the kitchen, where she had prepared coffee and laid out the map on the table, now protected by a clear plastic sheet she'd found in Jason's old office supplies. Mercer adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses as he bent over the document, his initial polite interest transforming into evident excitement as he took in the details. "Good heavens!" he breathed, carefully examining the markings without touching the fragile paper. "Where on earth did you find this?" "In the attic," Elena replied, watching his reaction carefully. "It was stored in a metal tube. Do you recognize what it is?" Mercer nodded slowly, his expression serious. "I believe this is a surveillance map related to Project Manhattan, not the main facilities themselves, but what appears to be a network of monitoring stations." He pointed to the 7 marked locations. These would have been radiation detection outposts designed to monitor any Soviet attempts to detect our nuclear development through atmospheric testing. "So it is connected to the atomic bomb program," Elena said, her suspicions confirmed. "Yes, but in a very specific way," Mercer continued, excitement evident in his voice. "This appears to be part of a counterintelligence operation, not the weapons development itself, but the security network designed to protect it." He studied the cryptic notations more carefully. "These codes likely represent communication protocols or radiation measurement baselines, extraordinary preservation, he murmured almost to himself. Eleanor felt a chill despite the warm kitchen. Would something like this still be classified? Mercer looked up, seeming to recognize the concern in her question. Technically, most Manhattan Project documents were declassified decades ago, but certain security protocols and counterintelligence operations remained classified much longer. He straightened, regarding her thoughtfully. Elena, this is a historically significant document that belongs in an archive. Have you considered contacting the National Archives or perhaps the Los Alamos Historical Society? Before Elena could respond, the distinctive crunch of tires on gravel announced another visitor, one she wasn't expecting. Through the kitchen window, she saw a black SUV with government plates pulling up beside Professor Mercer's Volvo. "Are you expecting someone else?" Mercer asked, noting her sudden tension. "No," Eleanor replied, hurriedly rolling up the map and returning it to its protective tube. "Would you excuse me for a moment?" Her heart hammering, Eleanor slipped the tube into a kitchen drawer before going to answer the door. Standing on her porch was a woman in her 50s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, her government identification card already extended. "Ms. Reeves, I'm Director Catherine Harlow with the Department of Energy's Historical Records Division. I'd like to speak with you regarding an item that may have been found on your property." Elena felt her mouth go dry. "How would you know about anything on my property?" Director Harlow's expression remained professional, but not unkind. "One of your online searches triggered a monitoring system for keywords related to classified historical materials. May I come in? I assure you you're not in any trouble." Eleanor hesitated, then stepped aside to allow the woman entry. In the kitchen, Professor Mercer had risen from his chair, looking as surprised as Eleanor felt. "Professor Alan Mercer." Director Harlow nodded in recognition. "Your work on Cold War military history is well regarded in our department. Your presence here suggests Ms. Reeves has indeed found something of historical significance." The unexpected acknowledgement momentarily flustered the professor. "I was just providing some historical context for an interesting find," he explained cautiously. Director Harlow turned her attention back to Elena. "Ms. Reeves, if you've discovered a cylindrical document container with a map related to certain government operations from the 1940s, I'm authorized to discuss its significance with you and explore appropriate next steps." Elena felt oddly cornered in her own kitchen. "I'm not comfortable sharing anything until I understand what's happening here. How did you find me so quickly? And why would the Department of Energy care about an old map?" The director nodded, as if she had expected this response. "Your husband and his father both served in military intelligence. Your father-in-law, Colonel Robert Reeves, was actually instrumental in modernizing certain security protocols based on lessons learned from earlier programs." She paused, seeming to make a decision. "What you've found is likely part of Operation Shadow Watch, a counterintelligence network developed to protect Manhattan Project facilities from Soviet detection." The specificity of her knowledge confirmed Elena's growing suspicion that her discovery was indeed significant. "And if I have found such a map, then the US government would be very interested in properly preserving this historical document," Director Harlow replied smoothly, "and frankly, in ensuring that certain technical details it contains don't become publicly available." "Are you suggesting the information is still sensitive?" Professor Mercer interjected, professional interest overriding his initial caution. "Not in the way you might think," Director Harlow clarified. "The specific locations and technical parameters on that map could provide a blueprint for detecting modern nuclear facilities, including those in nations currently developing nuclear capabilities against international agreements." The scientific principles haven't changed, even if the technology has advanced. Elena considered this explanation, finding it both plausible and concerning. So what exactly are you proposing, Director Harlow? I'm authorized to offer you fair compensation for the document's historical value, the director responded. The Department of Energy would ensure its proper preservation while restricting access to certain technical elements that could pose national security concerns. Fair compensation meaning what exactly? Elena asked, pragmatic concerns surfacing despite the surreal nature of the conversation. Director Harlow met her gaze directly. $2 million, with full acknowledgement of your family's role in preserving this historical document. Your father-in-law would be formally recognized for his contribution to national security. The sum was so far beyond anything Elena had expected that she almost laughed. $2 million would solve every financial problem she faced. The mortgage, property taxes, college funds for the children, the endless repairs the farmhouse needed. It would transform their lives completely. Yet something held her back from immediate acceptance. This map was part of her husband's family legacy, potentially connected to his grandfather's secret war service. It felt wrong to simply hand it over, even for such a substantial sum. I need time to think about this, Elena said finally, and to discuss it with my children. This is part of their family history. Director Harlow seemed to recognize the emotional complexity behind Elena's hesitation. Of course. However, I should mention that if this document contains what we believe it does, there are national security protocols that would ultimately require its surrender to proper authorities. She softened her tone slightly. I'd much prefer this be handled as a voluntary transfer with appropriate compensation and recognition, rather than through more formal channels. The implied warning was clear, despite the director's diplomatic delivery. Elena felt her options narrowing, but her instinct for protecting her family's interests remained strong. I'll need at least until tomorrow to consider your offer, she stated firmly, and I'd like Professor Mercer to stay involved as an independent historical consultant to ensure the document's historical significance is properly acknowledged. Director Harlow considered this for a moment, then nodded. That's reasonable. I'll return tomorrow morning at 10. She handed Elena a business card with her contact information. Please call if you have any questions before then. After the director departed in her government SUV, Elena turned to Professor Mercer, who looked as stunned as she felt. Did that really just happen? She asked, sinking into a kitchen chair. It did indeed, Mercer confirmed, removing his glasses to clean them. A habit Elena had noticed he fell into when processing unexpected information. And I must say, in all my years studying military history, I've never been directly involved in something like this. He replaced his glasses, regarding Elena thoughtfully. $2 million is an extraordinary offer. It is, Elena agreed, her mind racing with possibilities and concerns. But I can't help feeling there's more to this story than Director Harlow is sharing. Professor Mercer nodded slowly. The speed of their response is certainly noteworthy. A simple online search shouldn't trigger such immediate government attention unless they were already looking for this specific document. This observation sent a chill through Elena. You think they've been searching for it? It's possible, Mercer acknowledged, especially if the technical information it contains is indeed still relevant to modern nuclear detection methods. As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across the kitchen, Elena faced a decision more consequential than any she had encountered since losing Jason. The map, hidden in her kitchen drawer, represented both opportunity and uncertainty, a potential financial salvation for her family, but also a historical connection to her children's heritage. What would you do, Alan? She asked quietly. Professor Mercer considered the question carefully. I would want to understand exactly what I was holding before making any decision, he replied. Knowledge is power in negotiations like these. His response crystallized something in Elena's mind. You're right, and I think I know where to start. After the professor departed, promising to research Operation Shadow Watch through his academic connections, Elena sat at her kitchen table with a notepad, methodically listing what she knew and what she still needed to discover. As darkness fell over the Pennsylvania countryside, the old farmhouse seemed to hold its secrets closer, while offering Elena the first real hope for her family's future that she had felt in years. The children returned from their after-school activities to find their mother unusually distracted, though she did her best to maintain their normal evening routine: homework supervision, dinner, and their favorite Tuesday night board game tradition. As they played, Elena looked at her children's faces in the warm lamplight, wondering how much to tell them about the day's extraordinary events. Chloe, perceptive as always, finally set down her game piece and fixed her mother with a serious gaze. "What's going on, Mom? You've been weird all night." Mason nodded in agreement. "Yeah, you haven't even complained once about me not cleaning my room." Elena smiled despite herself. "I found something in the attic today," she began carefully. "Something that might have belonged to your great-grandfather William from his time in the army during World War II. Both children straightened with interest. Family history, particularly military connections, had taken on greater significance for them since losing their father. "What kind of something?" Chloe pressed. "A very old map," Elena explained, deciding on a version of the truth. "That wouldn't overwhelm them. It might be historically important, and there are people interested in preserving it properly." "Like a treasure map?" Mason asked, his 10-year-old imagination immediately captivated. "Not exactly," Elena replied, "though in a way it might. Be valuable. I'm still figuring that out. Is that who that official-looking lady was? The one in the fancy car?" Chloe asked, revealing she'd noticed more than Elena had realized. Elena nodded, impressed by her daughter's observational skills. "Yes, she works for the government, in a department that preserves historical documents." "Are you going to give it to them?" Mason asked, his expression suddenly concerned. "It's ours, isn't it, if it was Great-Grandpa William's?" The question cut to the heart of Elena's dilemma. "That's what I'm trying to decide," she admitted. "Sometimes historical items are so important that they belong in special collections where researchers can study them and learn from them." "Like museums?" Chloe suggested. "Similar to that, yes." Elena reached out to squeeze her daughter's hand. "The woman has offered to pay us for the map, which would help us a lot with the farm and other expenses." Mason's eyes widened. "How much?" Elena hesitated, then decided on honesty. "A lot, sweetheart. Enough to fix the roof and the tractor, and put away money for your college, and maybe even take that trip to Disney World someday." The children exchanged glances, clearly processing this information. "Would Dad want you to sell it?" Chloe asked finally, her young voice carrying the weight of her father's absent perspective. The question brought unexpected tears to Elena's eyes. "I think he would want us to be secure and happy," she answered carefully. "But he'd also want us to understand what we're giving up. That's why I need a little more time to learn about what this map really means." As she tucked the children into bed later that evening, Elena felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. Whatever decision she made would affect not just their financial future, but also their connection to their family's past. The map represented both opportunity and heritage, and balancing those values would require more information than she currently possessed. After the children were asleep, Elena returned to the kitchen and carefully extracted the map from its hiding place. Under the bright light, she photographed every detail, then spent hours cross-referencing the geographical features with online maps of the southwestern United States. By midnight, she had tentatively identified several of the marked locations as remote areas in the mountains of New Mexico, not far from where the Los Alamos National Laboratory had been established for the Manhattan Project. The pieces were beginning to fit together, but Elena still couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something important, something that might explain the government's unusually rapid and high-level response to her discovery. As she finally prepared for bed, her phone pinged with a text message from Professor Mercer. Found something interesting about Shadow Watch. We'll call in morning. Guard that map carefully. The cryptic message did nothing to ease Elena's growing sense that she had stumbled into something far more complex than a simple historical artifact. As she drifted into an uneasy sleep, the faces of her children mingled in her dreams with images of mountain outposts, government agents, and her father-in-law in his military uniform, all seeming to watch her with expectations she couldn't quite decipher. Outside, unknown to Elena, a nondescript car parked at the end of her long driveway, its occupants settling in for overnight surveillance of the farmhouse where a single mother had accidentally uncovered one of the most sensitive counterintelligence maps of the early nuclear age, a document whose technical specifications still held relevance in the complex world of modern nuclear proliferation monitoring. Elena's phone rang just after 7 a.m., jolting her from a restless sleep filled with dreams of government agents and hidden military outposts. Professor Mercer's number flashed on the screen. "I hope I didn't wake you," he began without preamble. When she answered, "But I've been researching Operation Shadow Watch all night, and what I've found is quite remarkable." Elena sat up, instantly alert. "Tell me everything." Operation Shadow Watch wasn't just a standard security protocol, Mercer explained, his voice hushed despite speaking over the phone. It was a highly specialized counterintelligence network, designed to detect Soviet attempts to locate our nuclear development sites through atmospheric radiation monitoring. "That aligns with what Director Harlow mentioned," Elena confirmed, moving to her bedroom window to check if the government SUV had returned. The driveway remained empty, but she noticed a dark sedan parked at the distant end of her long drive that hadn't been there the previous evening. "There's more," Mercer continued. "According to declassified documents I accessed through university channels, Shadow Watch was decommissioned in 1962, but not because it became obsolete. The operation was allegedly integrated into a more advanced detection network codenamed Sentinel." "And Sentinel is still active?" Elena guessed, watching as her children began to stir in their rooms across the hall. "That's where things get interesting," Mercer replied. "There's no official record of Sentinel being deactivated, but also very little information about its current status. My academic clearance hit walls when I tried to access anything after 1985. Elena processed this information as she moved quietly toward the kitchen, not wanting to wake Chloe and Mason yet. "So the map might contain information that's still relevant to current security systems." "Precisely, and if Sentinel evolved from Shadow Watch, the fundamental detection principles documented on your map could potentially compromise modern nuclear monitoring capabilities." The implications settled heavily on Elena's shoulders as she started the coffee maker. That would explain the government's rapid response and substantial offer. "Indeed," Mercer agreed. "And there's one more thing you should know. I found references to your father-in-law, Colonel Robert Reeves, in connection with Sentinel's modernization efforts in the early 1980s. It appears he was instrumental in adapting Shadow Watch principles to satellite-based monitoring systems." This new revelation sent a chill through Elena. "You think he brought the original Shadow Watch map home as reference material for his work on Sentinel?" It's a reasonable theory, Mercer confirmed. And if true, it means your map isn't just a historical artifact. It's potentially the original template for current nuclear detection networks. The coffee maker beeped as Elena contemplated the professor's words. So, what should I do? Accept Director Harlow's offer? Before you decide anything, Mercer cautioned, I'd like to examine the map once more with this new context in mind. There might be details we missed yesterday. Elena agreed to meet him at the farmhouse at 9, giving her time to get the children off to school before Director Harlow's scheduled return at 10. After hanging up, she stood by the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching the rising sun illuminate the rolling Pennsylvania landscape that had been in her husband's family for generations. The farm had always represented both burden and blessing, a connection to Jason's heritage that demanded constant financial sacrifice to maintain. Now, unexpectedly, it had yielded a discovery that could potentially resolve their financial struggles forever. Yet Elena couldn't shake the feeling that accepting Director Harlow's offer might mean surrendering something more valuable than money could measure. A piece of her children's legacy and a direct connection to their grandfather's classified work protecting the nation. "Mom, why are you up so early?" Chloe appeared in the doorway, her dark hair tousled from sleep, so much like her father's that it momentarily caught Elena's breath. "Just thinking, sweetheart," Elena replied, setting her coffee down to pull her daughter into a hug. "We have some important decisions to make today." "About the map?" Chloe asked, perceptive as always. Elena nodded. "About the map. About the farm, about our future." "Is it really worth a lot of money?" Chloe asked hesitantly. "The government thinks so," Elena confirmed. "Enough to solve many of our problems." Chloe considered this with a seriousness that seemed beyond her 13 years. "But would we still keep the farm? Dad always said it was our heritage." The question pierced straight to the core of Elena's dilemma. "That's what I'm trying to figure out, honey. Sometimes we have to balance honoring the past with building a secure future." Chloe nodded solemnly. "Dad also said that doing the right thing isn't always doing the easy thing." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes at her daughter's simple wisdom. "Your father was a very smart man." As they prepared breakfast and woke Mason for school, Elena found herself studying her children with new awareness. Every decision she made now would shape not just their financial security, but their understanding of values, heritage, and responsibility to something larger than themselves. After sending them off on the school bus with extra tight hugs, Eleanor returned to the kitchen and carefully removed the map from its hiding place. Spreading it on the table once more, she examined it with fresh eyes, informed by Professor Mercer's revelations about Operation Shadow Watch and Sentinel. The 7 marked locations now took on new significance, not just historical curiosities, but potentially the foundation for modern nuclear security protocols. Elena traced the pattern they formed across the mountainous terrain, noting how they created a precise geometric arrangement around a central area that was marked only with a small triangle. At the bottom of the map, the cryptic message seemed to pulse with renewed meaning. "The 7 stations guard the path to Manhattan's shadow. What remains hidden must stay concealed." The Manhattan Project's shadow, the ongoing nuclear security apparatus that had evolved from those early days of atomic development, a system her father-in-law had helped modernize, and that apparently remained relevant even in today's high-tech world of satellite surveillance and digital monitoring. The sound of tires on gravel announced Professor Mercer's arrival. Elena carefully re-rolled the map, but left it on the table as she went to greet him. "You look like you haven't slept," she observed as he entered the kitchen, noting the shadows under his eyes and the rumpled appearance of his normally neat attire. Academic excitement, he admitted with a tired smile. It's not every day a history. Professor stumbles into active national security matters. They returned to the kitchen, where Eleanor had prepared fresh coffee. Mercer approached the map with almost reverent care, studying it silently for several minutes before speaking. With what we now know about Shadow Watch and Sentinel, certain elements become clearer, he finally said, pointing to the numerical sequences alongside each marked location. These aren't just coordinates. They're frequency settings for radiation detection equipment, calibrated to identify specific isotope signatures. How can you tell? Elena asked, impressed by his technical interpretation. My doctoral work focused on Cold War scientific intelligence, Mercer explained. These numerical patterns are consistent with early radiation detection protocols. He traced the geometric pattern formed by the 7 marked locations. And this arrangement isn't random. It's designed to create an overlapping detection grid that could triangulate the source of any radiation anomaly. Eleanor watched as the professor's academic enthusiasm transformed the cryptic markings into a comprehensible security system. And this would still work today, even with modern technology? The fundamental physics hasn't changed, Mercer confirmed. Modern systems use more advanced sensors and computerized analysis, but the basic principles of radiation detection and triangulation remain the same. That's likely why your father-in-law referenced this map when modernizing Sentinel in the 1980s, and why the government is so interested in securing it now. A knock at the front door interrupted their analysis. Elena checked her watch, 9:30 a.m., half an hour before Director Harlow's scheduled return. "Are you expecting someone else?" Mercer asked, noting her confusion. "No," Elena replied, a flicker of unease passing through her. She quickly rolled the map and returned it to its protective tube. "Wait here." Approaching the front door cautiously, Elena was surprised to see not Director Harlow, but an elderly man in a well-worn military veteran's cap, leaning on a cane as he waited patiently on her porch. "Mrs. Reeves?" he inquired when she opened the door. "Elena Reeves?" "Yes," she confirmed hesitantly. "Can I help you?" "My name is Walter Simmons," the man introduced himself. "I served with your father-in-law, Colonel Robert Reeves, in the Army Corps of Engineers, Special Projects Division." He paused, studying her face carefully. "I believe you found something that Robert would have wanted you to understand fully before making any decisions about it." Elena felt a jolt of surprise. "How could you possibly know about that?" Walter Simmons smiled gently. "Small towns have big ears, Mrs. Reeves, and when a government SUV parks at a farmhouse where a colonel's daughter-in-law lives, certain people take notice." He gestured toward the door. "May I come in? I promise I'm not here to complicate your situation." "Quite the opposite." After a moment's hesitation, Eleanor stepped aside to allow the elderly veteran entry. Professor Mercer looked up in surprise as they entered the kitchen. "Alan Mercer." Walter nodded in recognition. "Your monograph on Cold War scientific intelligence operations was required reading for certain personnel in my department before I retired." Mercer appeared momentarily flustered by this unexpected acknowledgement. "Mr. Simmons, I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage." "Walter served with my father-in-law," Eleanor explained, still trying to process this unexpected development. "Apparently, in some capacity related to whatever's on this map." Walter eased himself into a kitchen chair with the careful movements of someone managing chronic pain. "Colonel Reeves and I worked together for nearly 2 decades on projects that officially never existed," he explained, "including the transition from Shadow Watch to Sentinel. Elena exchanged a glance with Professor Mercer, whose expression reflected her own astonishment. "Were you part of the original Manhattan Project?" Mercer asked. Walter chuckled. "No, I'm not quite that old. But I was part of the second generation, the men and women who adapted those early security systems for the Cold War era." He turned his attention to Elena. "Your father-in-law was a brilliant man, Mrs. Reeves. He revolutionized our detection capabilities by integrating satellite technology with the fundamental principles established by Shadowwatch. And those principles are documented on this map," Elena confirmed, indicating the metal tube on the table. "Yes," Walter nodded. "That map is effectively the Rosetta Stone of modern nuclear security monitoring. It documents the original detection parameters established in 1942, which remain the baseline for all subsequent systems." "Including current ones?" Professor Mercer pressed. Walter's expression grew more serious. "Including systems currently monitoring nuclear development in nations of particular concern to our national security, which is why certain parties are very interested in ensuring it doesn't fall into the wrong hands." Elena felt a growing sense that the situation was far more complex than she had initially realized. "Director Harlow from the Department of Energy is returning at 10 to discuss acquisition of the map. She's offered $2 million. Walter nodded thoughtfully. "Catherine Harlow is a serious professional. That offer reflects the document's genuine significance." He studied Elena carefully. "But I suspect you haven't decided whether to accept yet, which is why I'm here." "Why exactly are you here, Mr. Simmons?" Elena asked directly. "To encourage me to sell to the government?" "I'm here because Robert Reeves was not only my colleague, but my friend," Walter replied, his voice softening. "And because I believe you deserve to understand the full significance of what you've found before making your decision, including aspects Director Harlow is unlikely to share." The kitchen fell silent as Elena processed this statement. "What aspects?" Walter glanced at his watch. "We don't have much time before Director Harlow arrives, so I'll be direct. That map doesn't just document the original Shadowwatch detection network. It contains handwritten modifications by your father-in-law that were crucial to Sentinel's development." Elena immediately unrolled the map again, looking more closely at the notations in the margins. "These were written by Jason's father." "Some of them," Walter confirmed. "Robert recognized the historical importance of maintaining continuity between the original system and its modern evolution. He documented certain calibration adjustments directly on the original map, refinements that made the system dramatically more sensitive to specific isotope signatures. Improvements that are still classified," Professor Mercer deduced. Walter nodded. "And potentially still relevant to current monitoring operations, which is why the Department of Energy is motivated to secure the document." Elena studied the elderly veteran's face, trying to discern his motivation. "What do you think I should do, Mr. Simmons?" Walter smiled gently. "I'm not here to tell you what to do, Mrs. Reeves. I'm here to ensure you have information the government might not volunteer, specifically about your father-in-law's wishes regarding this document." "His wishes?" Elena repeated, surprised. "He knew the map was here?" "Robert entrusted that map to your husband before his deployment to Afghanistan," Walter explained. "He believed the document represented not just national security protocols, but a family legacy of service that should be preserved for future generations." This revelation hit Elena with unexpected force. The map wasn't just randomly stored in their attic. It had been deliberately entrusted to Jason, perhaps with the intention that it would eventually pass to his children. "Are you suggesting I shouldn't sell it to the government?" Elena asked, trying to understand Walter's purpose. "I'm suggesting there might be a middle path," Walter replied carefully, "one that both honors your family's legacy and addresses legitimate national security concerns." Before he could elaborate, the distinctive sound of a vehicle pulling into the driveway signaled Director Harlow's arrival. Walter rose from his chair with surprising agility for his age. "I've said what I came to say," he stated, reaching into his jacket to retrieve a business card. "If you'd like to discuss options further after your meeting with Director Harlow, please call me." Elena accepted the card, noting it contained only a name and phone number. No title, no agency affiliation, no address. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Simmons." As Walter made his way toward the front door, he paused and turned back. "Your father-in-law believed that knowledge, properly respected, was meant to be preserved, not obscured, even when that knowledge carried significant power. It's why he documented his adaptations directly on the original map, instead of creating a separate classified document." With that cryptic statement, he nodded farewell and departed through the side door, somehow timing his exit to avoid encountering Director Harlow on the front porch. "That was unexpected," Professor Mercer remarked as the sound of Walter's car faded down the driveway. "This entire situation is unexpected," Elena replied, tucking Walter's card into her pocket as a knock sounded at the front door. "And I have a feeling it's about to get even more complicated." Director Harlow had returned as promised, but this time she was accompanied by a younger man who introduced himself as Dr. Thomas Reynolds, a technical advisor from the Department of Energy's Historical Archives Division. His presence underscored the government's serious interest in the map. "I appreciate you taking time to consider our proposal, Ms. Reeves," Director Harlow began, once they were seated in the living room. Professor Mercer had remained at Elena's request, providing a reassuring academic presence as the negotiations began. "Before we continue," Elena started, feeling more confident than she had the previous day, "I'd like to understand exactly what would happen to the map if I agreed to your offer." Director Harlow exchanged a glance with Dr. Reynolds before responding. "The document would be secured in our special collections facility, where its historical significance would be properly documented while sensitive technical aspects would be restricted from public access." "And my father-in-law's contributions?" Elena pressed. "The notations he added during Sentinel's development?" A flicker of surprise crossed Director Harlow's face. "You've identified those as Colonel Reeves's handwriting?" "Let's just say I've learned more about the map's significance since yesterday," Elena replied carefully, "including its connection to my husband's family legacy." Director Harlow recalibrated her approach. "Colonel Reeves's contributions to national security are well documented within defense circles, Ms. Reeves. The transfer agreement would include provisions for appropriate recognition of his role in adapting Shadow Watch principles for modern applications." Elena considered this, then decided to press further. "And my children's connection to their heritage. This map represents their grandfather's work, protecting our nation. Simply selling it feels like surrendering something meant to be preserved within our family." Dr. Reynolds leaned forward. "Perhaps we could discuss a modified arrangement," he suggested, glancing at Director Harlow for approval. "In cases of exceptional historical significance, we sometimes create detailed replicas for the original owners, with certain technical elements redacted to address security concerns." Director Harlow nodded. "That would be possible. Your children could maintain a connection to their grandfather's work through a museum-quality replica, while the sensitive technical details would be secured appropriately." Professor Mercer, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke, "And the financial arrangement would remain the same, $2 million. "Yes," Director Harlow confirmed. The value reflects both the historical significance and the current, technical relevance of the document. Elena felt the weight of the decision pressing upon her. $2 million would transform her family's financial situation entirely, securing the farm, providing for her children's education, eliminating the constant stress of living on the financial edge. Yet Walter Simmons's parting words echoed in her mind, suggesting there might be more to consider than money and security protocols. "I need to consult with my children before making a final decision," Elena stated firmly. "This isn't just about financial compensation. It's about their connection to their father and grandfather." Director Harlow appeared ready to object, but instead nodded reluctantly. "I understand family considerations, Ms. Reeves. However, I should emphasize that time is a factor. If information about this document were to become publicly known, other interested parties might complicate the situation considerably." The implied warning was clear, though diplomatically delivered. Elena maintained her resolve. "I'll have an answer for you tomorrow morning. In the meantime, I'd like to keep the map in my possession." After further discussion of logistical details and security considerations, Director Harlow and Dr. Reynolds departed, leaving Elena and Professor Mercer alone in the suddenly quiet farmhouse. "You're handling this remarkably well," Mercer observed. Once the government SUV had disappeared down the driveway, Elena sighed, the composed facade she had maintained during the meeting finally slipping. "I'm terrified of making the wrong decision. $2 million would change everything for us, but what if money isn't the most important factor here?" Mercer nodded thoughtfully. Walter Simmons clearly believed there was more at stake than financial compensation. His comment about knowledge being preserved, not obscured, seemed particularly meaningful. Elena retrieved Walter's card from her pocket, staring at the simple white rectangle with its minimal information. "He said there might be a middle path. I wonder what he meant by that." "Perhaps you should find out," Mercer suggested gently, "before making your final decision." Elena nodded, coming to a decision. "Would you mind staying here while I pick up the children from school? I want them involved in this conversation from this point forward. It's their heritage as much as mine." After Professor Mercer agreed, Elena drove to the local elementary and middle schools, arranging for both children to be released early. On the drive home, she carefully explained the situation in terms they could understand, that their grandfather had helped develop important systems for protecting the country, that the map documented his work, and that the government wanted to preserve it properly. $2 million is a lot of money," Mason remarked from the back seat, his 10-year-old mind immediately grasping the practical implications. "It is," Elena agreed. "It would mean we could keep the farm without struggling, that we could fix everything that needs repairing, that we wouldn't have to worry about college costs when the time comes." "But you're not sure if we should sell it," Chloe deduced, as perceptive as always. Elena glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror. "I'm not sure. That's why I wanted you both involved in the discussion. This map is part of your family history, your connection to your grandfather and the important work he did." When they returned to the farmhouse, Professor Mercer had prepared lunch, a simple spread of sandwiches and fruit that allowed for casual conversation as Elena brought the children fully into the decision-making process. "I wish Dad was here," Mason said suddenly, setting down his sandwich. "He'd know what to do." Elena reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "I do too, sweetheart. But I think your dad would want us to make this decision together, as a family." As they discussed the options, selling outright, accepting the replica offer, or exploring whatever alternative Walter Simmons might propose, Elena was struck by her children's thoughtful engagement with the complexities of the situation. Even Mason, despite his age, seemed to grasp that this decision involved more than money. I think we should call Mr. Simmons, Chloe suggested finally. If he worked with Grandpa, he might know what Grandpa would have wanted us to do. Elena smiled at her daughter's straightforward wisdom. I think that's an excellent idea. With the children and Professor Mercer listening, Elena called the number on Walter's card. He answered immediately, as if expecting her call. Mrs. Reeves, I've been hoping to hear from you. My children and I would like to discuss that middle path you mentioned, Elena explained. Would you be willing to come back to the farm? I'm already on my way, Walter replied, surprising her. I had a feeling you might want to explore alternatives before committing to Director Harlow's proposal. Within half an hour, Simmons had rejoined them around the kitchen table, this time meeting Elena's children with genuine warmth and sharing brief stories about working with their grandfather that made Colonel Robert Reeves come alive for them in ways Elena had never been able to manage. Your grandfather was a patriot in the truest sense, Walter told them. He believed in protecting this country's security while also honoring its fundamental values, including the importance of knowledge and transparency whenever possible. Is that why he wrote his notes directly on the old map? Chloe asked, demonstrating that she had been carefully following the earlier discussions. Walter smiled appreciatively at her perception. Exactly. Robert believed in creating continuity between generations of knowledge, showing how new discoveries built upon fundamental principles established by those who came before. Eleanor brought the conversation back to the practical decision at hand. You mentioned a middle path, Mr. Simmons. What did you mean by that? Walter's expression grew more serious. The Department of Energy is primarily concerned with preventing certain technical specifications from becoming publicly available. Specifically, the calibration refinements your father-in-law documented for detecting particular isotope signatures. The handwritten notations, Professor Mercer confirmed. Yes, Walter nodded. Those represent the truly sensitive information from a national security perspective. The original Shadow Watch framework is historically significant, but less problematic from a security standpoint. Elena began to see where this was heading. So, instead of selling the entire document to the government, you're suggesting we might separate the historical elements from the sensitive technical details? Precisely, Walter confirmed. With appropriate expertise, it would be possible to create two versions of the map, one maintaining the original historical framework that could remain in your family's possession, and another containing Robert's technical refinements that could be secured by the Department of Energy. But Director Harlow wants the original document, Elena pointed out, not a copy. True, Walter acknowledged, which is why this approach would require negotiation. But it would allow your family to maintain possession of a significant historical artifact while addressing legitimate national security concerns. And the financial compensation? Professor Mercer inquired. Likely reduced, Walter admitted candidly, but still substantial given the government's interest in securing the sensitive elements. As the afternoon light slanted through the kitchen windows, Elena and her children considered this alternative approach. It offered a compromise that would preserve their connection to their family's legacy while still providing financial relief, though perhaps not the transformative sum Director Harlow had initially proposed. What do you think? Elena asked her children, determined to include them fully in this momentous decision. Chloe and Mason exchanged glances before Chloe spoke for both of them. I think Grandpa would have wanted us to keep part of his work in our family, she said thoughtfully, even if it means less money. Mason nodded in agreement. And we could still fix the roof and stuff, right, Mom? Elena smiled at her son's practical concerns. Yes, we could still address the essential repairs. She turned to Walter. How would we even begin to negotiate such an arrangement with Director Harlow? Walter's eyes twinkled with unexpected humor. "I believe I might be able to assist with opening those discussions. Catherine Harlow was once my student at the Defense Intelligence College before she moved to the Energy Department. She might be willing to consider alternatives if the approach comes through appropriate channels." As the sun began to set over the Pennsylvania hills, casting long shadows across the farmland that had been in the Reeves family for generations, Elena felt a newfound clarity about the path forward. This unexpected discovery in her attic had created an opportunity not just for financial relief, but for a deeper connection to her children's heritage and their grandfather's legacy of service. Whatever financial arrangement they ultimately negotiated with the government, the process itself had already yielded something priceless, a renewed sense of purpose and family identity that transcended the constant struggles of daily survival. For the first time since Jason's death, Elena felt they were making decisions from a position of strength rather than desperation, guided by values more enduring than immediate financial need. As Walter Simmons departed with a promise to initiate conversations with Director Harlow and Professor Mercer returned to his university obligations, Elena stood on the porch with her children, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples above their weathered but beloved farm. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Chloe asked, leaning against her mother's side. Eleanor wrapped her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "I think we're honoring what matters. Most family, heritage, and principles. Your father and grandfather would be proud." Mason looked up at her with Jason's eyes. "And we still get to keep the farm," Elena laughed, ruffling his hair affectionately. "Yes, we still get to keep the farm. And maybe now we can finally fix that leaky roof that started this whole adventure." As darkness settled over the countryside, the lights of the farmhouse glowed with renewed warmth and purpose. The ancient map that had been hidden away for decades had brought not just the promise of financial relief, but something far more valuable, a reconnection with the legacy of service, integrity, and quiet heroism that had shaped their family. Across generations. In the attic where this journey had begun, the cylindrical container now sat on Elena's bedroom dresser, a visible reminder that sometimes our greatest treasures are hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal their true value. The next morning dawned with remarkable clarity, as if the universe itself recognized the significance of the day ahead. Elena stood on the farmhouse porch with her first cup of coffee, watching the sun crest the eastern ridge. Walter Simmons had arranged a meeting with Director Harlow at the local Historical Society building, neutral ground that would hopefully facilitate the complex negotiation he had proposed. Rather than feeling anxious, Elena experienced a strange sense of purpose. For 6 years since Jason's death, she had merely been surviving, paying bills, maintaining the farm, raising her children. Today felt different. Today she was actively shaping their future, not just enduring it. "Are we ready for this?" Professor Mercer asked, joining her on the porch. He had arrived early to accompany her to the meeting, providing both moral support and academic credibility to their alternative proposal. "As ready as we'll ever be," Eleanor replied, watching Chloe help Mason tie his shoes on the living room floor. She had decided to include her children in the meeting, despite Walter's gentle suggestion that negotiations might proceed more smoothly without them. "They deserve to be part of this process," she had insisted. "It's their heritage we're discussing." The Historical Society occupied a restored Victorian mansion in the center of town, its stately architecture a reminder of the region's prosperous past. Elena parked her weathered pickup truck beside Director Harlow's government SUV, the contrast between the vehicles a visual representation of the power imbalance in the upcoming negotiation. Walter Simmons greeted them at the entrance, his military bearing still evident despite his age. "Catherine arrived early," he informed them quietly. She's brought technical support with her, 2 specialists from the Energy Department's Classification Division. Is that a good sign or a bad one? Elena asked, adjusting Mason's collar nervously. It means she's taking our proposal seriously, Walter replied with a reassuring smile. Sometimes bureaucratic machinery works in our favor. The meeting room featured a large oak table that had once graced a local lumber baron's dining room. Director Harlow rose as they entered, her professional demeanor softening slightly when she spotted the children. Ms. Reeves, Professor Mercer, she acknowledged, then turned to Walter with a mix of respect and wariness. Colonel Simmons, it's been some time. Almost 15 years, Catherine, Walter confirmed with a nod. Thank you for agreeing to this discussion. The introductions continued, with Director Harlow presenting her colleagues, Dr. Reynolds, whom Elena had met previously, and Dr. Lynn, a soft-spoken woman who specialized in document authentication and preservation. Elena introduced Chloe and Mason, who displayed remarkably good behavior as they settled into chairs, flanking their mother. I understand you're proposing an alternative to our original acquisition offer, Director Harlow began once everyone was seated, addressing Elena directly. Colonel Simmons outlined the general concept, but I'd like to hear the specifics from you. Elena took a deep breath, finding confidence in the presence of her children. The map represents both a national security concern and my family's heritage, she began, her voice steadier than she had expected. My father-in-law dedicated his career to protecting this country, and his notes on that document represent an important connection between my children and their grandfather's legacy. Director Harlow nodded, her expression neutral but attentive. We propose creating 2 versions of the document, Elena continued. The original Shadow Watch framework would remain in our family's possession as a historical artifact, while my father-in-law's technical refinements, the truly sensitive information, would be transferred to the Department of Energy for appropriate security measures. Dr. Lin leaned forward. You're suggesting physically separating elements of the original document. No, Professor Mercer intervened smoothly. We're proposing creating a museum-quality reproduction of the base map, with Colonel Reeves's technical annotations carefully removed. The original would be transferred to your custody, while the reproduction would remain with the Reeves family. And the financial compensation, Director Harlow inquired, getting directly to the practical aspects. We recognize this arrangement would reduce the document's value to the government, Elena acknowledged. We're prepared to accept a lower figure that reflects this compromise. Director Harlow exchanged glances with her colleagues before responding. The department authorized me to offer $2 million based on the complete acquisition of the original document. A significantly modified arrangement would necessarily affect that figure. We understand, Elena replied calmly. What we're seeking is a balance, appropriate compensation that addresses our financial needs while preserving our family's connection to this historical artifact. As the negotiation proceeded, Elena found herself increasingly impressed by the thoughtful questions posed by her children. Mason wanted to know if they could still show their friends the map. With appropriate redactions, yes, Dr. Lin had confirmed, while Chloe asked insightful questions about how her grandfather's contributions would be documented for historical purposes. The technical discussion grew complex as Dr. Lin explained the preservation challenges involved in creating an authentic reproduction while ensuring that sensitive calibration notations were completely removed. Through it all, Elena maintained a clear focus on the core principles guiding her decision: financial security for her family, balanced with preserving their connection to their heritage. I believe we can reach a workable compromise, Director Harlow finally stated after nearly 2 hours of discussion. The department would acquire the original document for secure preservation, with Colonel Reeves's contributions appropriately acknowledged in classified records. Your family would receive a museum-quality reproduction of the base Shadow Watch map, with sensitive technical elements removed. And the compensation? Elena pressed gently. Director Harlow named a figure, $850,000, substantially less than the original offer, but still a life-changing sum for Elena's family. That would be acceptable, Elena confirmed, after a brief consultation with Professor Mercer and Walter. As they worked through the details of the agreement, timing, legal documentation, reproduction specifications, Elena felt a growing sense of accomplishment. This wasn't just a financial transaction. It was a thoughtful balance between national security interests and her family's personal heritage. When they finally emerged from the Historical Society building into the bright afternoon sunlight, Elena felt as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The farm would be secure, her children's education funded, and their connection to their grandfather's legacy preserved in a meaningful way. "You negotiated like a seasoned diplomat," Walter remarked as they walked toward their vehicles. Robert would have been proud. "It wasn't just me," Elena replied, watching as Chloe and Mason raced ahead, their energy undiminished by the lengthy meeting. Having the children there reminded everyone what was really at stake, not just national security protocols, but family legacies and connections between generations. Walter nodded thoughtfully. "In my experience, the most effective security comes not from classification and secrecy, but from people understanding what truly matters and making principled choices to protect it." The following weeks brought a flurry of activity as the agreement was formalized. Department of Energy specialists arrived at the farm to document every aspect of the original map, while preservation experts began the painstaking process of creating an authentic reproduction that would remain in the Reeves family's possession. Dr. Lin proved to be an unexpected ally, taking particular care to ensure that the reproduction captured the historical essence of the document while meticulously removing the sensitive technical notations. She spent hours explaining the process to Chloe and Mason, nurturing their interest in historical preservation and scientific documentation. "Your grandfather was a brilliant man," she told them one afternoon as they observed her work. "The way he adapted these early detection parameters for satellite technology represents a significant advancement in monitoring capabilities." "Did you know our grandpa?" Mason asked, curious about this connection to the grandfather he had never met. "I knew of his work," Dr. Lin replied carefully. "In scientific circles, particularly those involved with nuclear security, Colonel Reeves was highly respected for his innovative approaches." These conversations provided Elena's children with insights into their family history that she could never have offered them alone, a deeper understanding of their grandfather's contributions that transcended the simple fact of his military service. As the financial aspects of the agreement were processed, Elena worked with a financial advisor recommended by Professor Mercer to establish a structured plan for the funds. The majority would be conservatively invested to provide for the children's education and long-term security, while a portion was allocated for immediate farm improvements and mortgage retirement. "You're handling this windfall with remarkable wisdom," the advisor commented during one of their planning sessions. "Most people in your position would be tempted to make more dramatic lifestyle changes." Elena smiled, thinking of the single extravagance she had allowed herself: a reliable new truck to replace her aging pickup. "Our needs haven't changed. We just want security and stability, not luxury." The farm itself underwent a gradual transformation as critical repairs were finally addressed. The leaky roof, that had initially sent Elena into the attic was replaced, along with the aging electrical system and the temperamental furnace that had barely survived the previous winter. Local contractors, aware of the Reeves family's improved circumstances but not the specific source, appreciated the steady work during what would normally have been their slow season. Through it all, Elena maintained the farm's daily operations, determined that her children understand the value of continued work and responsibility despite their changed financial circumstances. Chloe and Mason still had regular chores. School remained the priority, and the rhythms of rural life continued largely unchanged, if less burdened by financial anxiety. 3 months after discovering the map, Elena stood in what had once been Jason's office, now transformed into a small family museum. A custom-built display case housed the reproduction of the Shadow Watch map, alongside photographs of Colonel Robert Reeves in uniform and memorabilia from Jason's military service. The display created a visual narrative of 3 generations committed to service and protection. The Department of Energy had provided historical documentation about Shadow Watch, now declassified, that added context to the map's significance without compromising security. Alongside these materials, Elena had placed family photographs and letters, creating a space where her children could connect with their heritage in tangible ways. "This looks really official," Mason remarked, pressing his nose against the glass that protected the framed map reproduction. "Like a real museum." "It is real," Elena assured him, adjusting the lighting to better illuminate the display. "This is our family's history, just as important as anything in the Smithsonian, at least to us." Chloe, approaching the thoughtful age of 14, had developed a particular interest in her grandfather's scientific contributions. "Dr. Lin said Grandpa's work on radiation detection is still being used today," she noted, pride evident in her voice. "That's pretty amazing, isn't it?" "It is," Elena agreed, wrapping an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "And you know what's even more amazing? The way this map brought us not just financial security, but a deeper connection to who we are as a family. The transformation extended beyond the physical improvements to the farmhouse and the financial security that Elena now felt. There was a new confidence in her approach to parenting and decision-making, a sense that she was not just surviving as a single mother, but actively shaping her family's legacy. This confidence manifested in unexpected ways, from her decision to accept a permanent teaching position at the local school, no longer needing the flexibility of substitute work to manage farm emergencies, to her increased involvement in community organizations. The woman, who had been barely keeping her head above water now, had the capacity to help others, a responsibility she embraced with characteristic thoughtfulness. One crisp autumn afternoon, almost exactly a year after the discovery in the attic, Elena received an unexpected package delivered by a Department of Energy courier. Inside was a leather-bound volume titled The Shadow Watch Legacy, Protecting the Manhattan Project and Beyond, published by the department's Historical Archives, Division for Limited Governmental Distribution. A note from Director Harlow accompanied the book. "Ms. Reeves, I thought you and your children might appreciate this official history, which includes appropriate recognition of Colonel Reeves's contributions. Some details remain classified, but this represents our commitment to acknowledging the historical record while maintaining necessary security protocols. With respect, Catherine Harlow." The volume dedicated an entire chapter to the modernization of nuclear detection systems during the early satellite era, with Colonel Robert Reeves credited as the primary architect of the transition from ground-based to orbital monitoring capabilities. There were even references to the original Shadow Watch map and its importance as a foundational document in nuclear security evolution. That evening, Elena gathered her children in the living room and read selected passages aloud, watching their faces glow with pride as their grandfather's accomplishments were described in official governmental language. The technical details were largely beyond their comprehension, but the recognition of his importance was clear and affirming. So Grandpa was basically a hero, Mason concluded, with the straightforward assessment of a now 11-year-old boy. He was, Elena confirmed, though not the kind who gets medals or public recognition. He was the quiet kind of hero who works behind the scenes to keep people safe. Like Dad was, Chloe added softly. Yes, Elena agreed, feeling the familiar ache of Jason's absence mingled with pride in his service. Your father and grandfather both understood that some of the most important work happens without public acknowledgement. Later, after the children had gone to bed, Elena sat alone on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge above the silhouetted barn. The farm that had once felt like a burden of obligation now represented something different, a heritage of purpose and principle that connected generations. The financial security provided by the agreement with the Department of Energy had removed the constant stress of potential loss, but Elena had come to understand that the true value of their discovery went far beyond monetary compensation. The map had revealed not just historical information about nuclear security protocols, but a family legacy of quiet competence and principled service. In the year since finding the cylindrical container in the attic, Elena had transformed from a struggling widow merely trying to hold on to her husband's family property into a confident guardian of a meaningful heritage. The farm was no longer just land and buildings to be maintained, but a physical manifestation of continuity between generations. A place where her children could understand their connection to something larger than themselves. Professor Mercer, who had become a regular visitor and valued friend, captured this transformation during one of his Sunday afternoon visits. "You've done something remarkable here, Elena," he observed as they watched Chloe and Mason playing with the neighbors' dog in the autumn golden field behind the barn. "You've turned a potential security concern into an opportunity for growth and connection." Elena smiled, considering his assessment. "I suppose I have, though it didn't feel like a conscious choice at the time. It just seemed important to balance practical needs with preserving something meaningful for the children. That balance is precisely what makes it remarkable," Mercer replied. "Most people would have simply taken the money and moved on, never recognizing the deeper value in maintaining connection to the past." As the seasons changed, bringing winter snow and then spring renewal to the Pennsylvania countryside, the Reeves farm settled into a new rhythm of purposeful activity. Elena's teaching career flourished as she pursued advanced certification in science education, inspired partly by learning about her father-in-law's scientific contributions. Chloe, entering high school with newfound confidence, developed a particular interest in environmental science and monitoring technologies, perhaps influenced by her growing understanding of her grandfather's work in detection systems. Mason, still in elementary school, remained focused on more immediate interests like baseball and building projects, but he took particular pride in showing visitors the family museum room and explaining in his own terms the significance of the map display. Walter Simmons remained a welcome presence in their lives, his connection to Colonel Reeves providing both children with stories and perspectives that helped them understand their family history more fully. His occasional visits became anticipated events, each one bringing new anecdotes about their grandfather's career and character. "Your grandfather used to say that security isn't just about keeping secrets," Walter told them during one such visit. "It's about understanding what truly needs protection and finding the right balance between secrecy and knowledge." This philosophy became something of a family motto, applied to everything from privacy settings on social media to decisions about sharing personal information with friends. Elena found herself frequently returning to the concept when helping her children navigate the complexities of growing up in a digital age, teaching them to differentiate between appropriate privacy and unnecessary secrecy. The family museum room evolved as well, with new items added as they were discovered or as government declassification made additional information available. What had begun as a simple display centered around the map reproduction gradually expanded to include historical photographs of early detection stations, correspondence between Colonel Reeves and military colleagues, appropriately redacted, and even a small section dedicated to the broader history of the Manhattan Project and subsequent nuclear security efforts. This expanding collection became a resource not just for the Reeves family, but occasionally for local students working on history projects. Under careful supervision, Elena allowed small groups to view the non-sensitive materials, using her teaching skills to help them understand the historical context of nuclear development and security concerns. "My mum found a super important map in our attic," Mason proudly told his classmates during a school presentation about family histories. "It was so important that the government paid us a lot of money for it, but we got to keep a copy because it's part of our heritage." While this simplified explanation raised a few eyebrows among parents and teachers, Elena appreciated her son's straightforward pride in their family story. She had worked with both children to develop age-appropriate understandings of their discovery, truthful narratives that honored the significance of the map without compromising the security considerations that had been so carefully negotiated. One unexpected outcome of the discovery was Elena's growing friendship with Dr. Lin, the preservation specialist who had created the map reproduction. Initially connected by professional necessity, the two women discovered shared interests in historical documentation and educational outreach. When Dr. Lin transferred to a regional office of the National Archives, their occasional professional contact evolved into regular coffee meetings and eventually genuine friendship. "You've done something quite remarkable with your life since we met," Dr. Lin observed during one such meeting, nearly 18 months after the map's discovery. "You've transformed a potential security problem into an educational opportunity for your children and your community." Elena considered this assessment, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "I suppose I have, though it never felt like a conscious strategy. I just wanted my children to understand their connection to something meaningful." "That's precisely what makes it work," Dr. Lin replied. "Authentic connection to heritage is far more powerful than any security classification system. Your children value the map because it connects them to their grandfather, not because it contains historically sensitive information." This observation crystallized something Elena had intuitively understood, but never fully articulated: that security, whether national or personal, ultimately depends on people valuing what truly matters and making principled choices to protect it. The elaborate classification systems and security protocols surrounding nuclear information were necessary, but ultimately secondary to the human commitment to responsible stewardship. As the 2-year anniversary of her attic discovery approached, Elena received an official invitation that brought the journey full circle. The Department of Energy's Historical Archives Division was opening a new permanent exhibition titled "Securing the Atomic Age, From Manhattan to Sentinel," and the Reeves family was specifically invited to attend the private opening ceremony. The exhibition includes appropriate recognition of Colonel Robert Reeves's contributions to modernizing detection methodologies, Director Harlow's accompanying note explained. "While certain technical details remain classified, we have created educational materials that acknowledge the historical significance of his work and its continuing relevance to modern security protocols. The invitation presented Elena with a significant decision whether to take her children to Washington, D.C. for the exhibition opening, potentially drawing more attention to their connection to classified historical materials. After careful consideration and consultation with Walter Simmons, she decided that the educational value and the opportunity for formal recognition of their grandfather's service outweighed any privacy concerns. The trip became an important milestone for the family, their first significant journey beyond Pennsylvania since Jason's death. Elena watched with quiet pride as her children navigated the complexities of travel, government security checkpoints, and formal social interactions with remarkable poise. The exhibition itself was thoughtfully designed to balance educational value with security considerations. Interactive displays explained the evolution of nuclear security without revealing technical specifics, while historical photographs and documents provided context for the development of detection systems from the Manhattan Project era through the Cold War. Colonel Robert Reeves featured prominently in the section dedicated to satellite-based monitoring systems, with a professional photograph of him in uniform accompanied by text describing his leadership in adapting ground-based detection principles for orbital applications. While no mention was made of the specific map that had been found in the Reeves farmhouse attic, the exhibition included similar historical documents that conveyed the evolution of security protocols across decades. During the reception following the exhibition opening, Director Harlow approached Elena and her children with unexpected warmth. "Your grandfather's work continues to influence our current security systems," she told Chloe and Mason. "The principles he refined are still protecting this country, even as the technology continues to evolve. We have a whole museum room about him at home," Mason informed her proudly. "Mom says it's important to remember where we come from." Director Harlow smiled at this simple articulation of heritage preservation. "Your mother is a very wise woman," she agreed, glancing at Elena with newfound respect. "Understanding our connections to the past helps us make better decisions for the future." As they toured the exhibition, Elena found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a water leak and a dusty cylindrical container. What might have been simply a financial transaction, selling the map for maximum profit, had instead become a profound exploration of family legacy, national security, and the balance between preserving heritage and protecting sensitive information. The financial security provided by the agreement with the Department of Energy had transformed their practical circumstances, removing the constant stress of potential loss. But the true value of their discovery had proven to be something far more profound, a reconnection with the principles and purposes that had guided previous generations of the Reeves family. Standing in the elegant exhibition space, watching her children absorb the historical context of their grandfather's work, Elena felt a deep sense of rightness about the decisions she had made. By balancing practical needs with preservation of meaningful connection, she had honored both her late husband's heritage and her children's future, finding security not just in financial terms, but in the continuity of values across generations. As they prepared to return to the farm, that now represented not burden, but legacy, Elena recognized that the map's greatest gift had not been the financial compensation, but the opportunity to transform mere survival into purposeful living. Journey from struggling single mother to confident guardian of a meaningful heritage that would shape her children's understanding of themselves and their place in the world. 3 years after discovering the mysterious map in her attic, Elena Reeves stood beside the newly renovated barn that now housed the Mapleton Rural Heritage Center, watching as community members gathered for its official opening. What had begun as a personal family museum had evolved into something much more, a celebration of the region's agricultural traditions and the generations of families who had shaped the landscape through their dedication and resilience. "I still can't believe you turned down a teaching position at Carnegie Mellon for this," Jennifer remarked, joining her sister-in-law at the refreshment table. The relationship between the two women had transformed since Elena's discovery had secured the farm's future, evolving from well-intentioned concern to genuine respect. "The university will still be there when the children are older," Elena replied, surveying the space with quiet pride. This felt more important, creating something lasting for the community while the kids are still forming their sense of identity and place. The Heritage Center represented the most expansive use of the financial security provided by the Department of Energy agreement. While most of the funds remained invested for the children's future education and the farm's long-term maintenance, Elena had dedicated a portion to transforming the underutilized barn into a community resource that celebrated local history. The Shadow Watch map reproduction remained the centerpiece of the family's private collection in the farmhouse, but the Heritage Center focused on broader regional history, agricultural innovations, the impact of 2 world wars on rural Pennsylvania, and the evolving relationship between farming communities and national security during the Cold War era. "Mum, Mrs. Peterson wants to know if we're still planning to host the Student History Project presentations next month," Chloe called, navigating through the crowd with the confidence of her 16 years. The responsibilities of helping establish the Heritage Center had accelerated her maturity, providing practical applications for her academic interests in history and science. "Absolutely," Elena confirmed. "Tell her we'll set up the projection equipment in the East Wing." As Chloe departed to deliver this message, Elena noticed Mason leading a group of his middle school classmates through the agricultural equipment display, explaining the evolution of farming technology with enthusiasm that belied his usual teenage self-consciousness. At 13, he had developed an unexpected interest in mechanical systems, perhaps influenced by learning about his grandfather's work, adapting technical frameworks for new applications. The transformation of the Reeves family over the 3 years since the map's discovery had been as significant as the physical changes to the property. Elena had completed a master's degree in educational leadership through online courses, positioning herself for eventual advancement within the school system while maintaining her commitment to the farm and heritage center. Chloe was now researching college programs in historical preservation and security studies, her career aspirations shaped by the family's extraordinary experience. Even Mason, despite his youth, had developed clearer sense of purpose, his natural mechanical aptitude finding expression in restoration projects around the farm. "Quite a turnout," Walter Simmons observed, approaching Eleanor with the deliberate pace of a man now in his mid-80s, but still ramrod straight in posture. Their friendship had deepened over the years, with Walter becoming something of a surrogate, grandfather to the children and a valued advisor to Elena. "The whole county seems to have shown up," Eleanor agreed, taking his arm as they moved toward the central exhibition area. "I don't think the farm has seen this many visitors since my wedding day." Walter nodded, his gaze traveling over the renovated barn with its carefully designed displays and preservation-quality lighting. Robert would have appreciated this approach, honoring the past while creating something meaningful for the future. It's the same philosophy that guided his work. The mention of Colonel Reeves still brought a wistful expression to Walter's face. Their friendship had spanned decades of classified work that had shaped national security protocols still in use today. In many ways, Walter's ongoing connection to the Reeves family represented his own form of legacy preservation, ensuring that Robert's contributions weren't forgotten and that his grandchildren understood the principles that had guided his service. "We've set aside space for the Veterans Oral History Project," Elena told him, guiding him toward a small recording studio tucked behind the main exhibition hall. "The Historical Society has equipment to capture high-quality video interviews, and we've already scheduled sessions with several Cold War-era veterans from the county." "That's essential work," Walter approved. "Too many stories are lost because no one thinks to ask until it's too late." He paused, seeming to make a decision. "I've been considering recording some of my own recollections, appropriately redacted for security, of course." Eleanor squeezed his arm gently. "The children would treasure that, Walter, especially your stories about their grandfather." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Professor Mercer, now Dean of History at the regional university. His academic career had flourished in the years following the MAP incident, his expertise in Cold War security operations bringing invitations to speak at prestigious institutions and consult on historical documentaries. "The place looks magnificent, Elena," he greeted her warmly. "You've created something truly special here." "With considerable help from your department," she acknowledged, grateful for the university students who had helped catalog artifacts and design educational materials as part of their coursework. "Mutually beneficial," Mercer assured her. "My students have gained practical experience that's already helping them secure positions at major museums and archives." As they continued their circuit of the exhibition space, Elena noticed Director Harlow standing quietly near the display on rural communication systems during the Cold War. The Department of Energy officials' presence at the opening was unexpected but not entirely surprising. Their professional relationship had evolved from the initial negotiation into something resembling mutual respect, with occasional departmental resources provided to support the educational aspects of the Heritage Center. Director Harlow, Elena, greeted her. "Thank you for coming. I didn't realize you were in the area." "I'm conducting a review at the Regional Archives facility," Harlow explained. Her formal demeanor softened somewhat by civilian clothing rather than her usual professional attire. "Dr. Lin mentioned the opening, and I thought it warranted a small detour." The two women had developed an understanding over the years. Not quite friendship, but a recognition of shared values despite their different professional contexts. Both prioritized preservation of important historical information while acknowledging the necessary balance between public education and security considerations. "The center is impressive," Harlow continued, gesturing toward the thoughtfully designed exhibits. "You've managed to create meaningful educational content about sensitive historical periods without compromising security protocols. That's no small achievement." "I had good advisors," Elena acknowledged, glancing toward Walter and Professor Mercer, who were deep in conversation nearby, "and a personal stake in getting the balance right." Harlow nodded, understanding the reference to the family's unique position straddling public history and classified information. "That reminds me, there's something I've been authorized to share with you." She reached into her bag and withdrew a slim folder bearing the Department of Energy seal. "Additional historical documentation about Shadow Watch has been declassified. Under our transparency initiative, I thought you might want to incorporate some of it into your family collection." Elena accepted the folder with genuine gratitude. Every new piece of declassified information helped her children understand their grandfather's work more fully, bridging the gap between family stories and official historical record. "Thank you. This means a great deal to us. The department has also authorized me to invite your children to apply for our Security Studies Scholarship Program when they're ready for college," Harlow added. Given their unique family connection to this history, they would be strong candidates. This unexpected offer represented significant recognition of the Reeves family's place in security history, not just as accidental discoverers of a classified document, but as part of a multi-generational commitment to protecting national interests. Elena felt a surge of pride at this acknowledgement of her children's heritage. "I'll certainly discuss it with them," she promised. "Chloe is already researching related programs, and even Mason has shown interest in the technical aspects of security systems." As the afternoon progressed, the Heritage Center filled with community members exploring exhibits, sharing stories prompted by historical photographs, and reconnecting with aspects of local history many had forgotten or never known. Elena moved among them, answering questions and accepting congratulations with quiet grace, maintaining the careful balance between curator and neighbor that made the center feel both professional and personally welcoming. When the time came for the official ribbon-cutting ceremony, Elena found herself momentarily overwhelmed by the journey that had brought them to this moment. Standing on the small platform with Chloe and Mason beside her, she surveyed the gathering of neighbors, school children, veterans, and dignitaries who had come to celebrate this addition to community life. "This Heritage Center exists because of an unexpected discovery," she began, her voice steady despite her emotion. "Not just the historical document that many of you have heard about, but the discovery that our deepest security comes not from what we possess, but from what we understand, about who we are and where we come from." She gestured toward the renovated barn around them. "This space celebrates the ordinary people who have shaped this region through their daily commitment to stewardship and service. Farmers who maintained the land through generations, veterans who protected our nation both visibly and behind the scenes, families who preserved traditions and values through changing times." As she spoke, Elena was struck by how profoundly her perspective had evolved from the desperate single mother who had climbed into the attic to investigate a leaky roof 3 years earlier. Financial security had provided the foundation, but the true transformation had come through reconnecting with purpose beyond mere survival, finding meaning in preservation, education, and service to something larger than herself. "The most valuable heritage isn't measured in artifacts or buildings," she continued, her gaze moving to her children who stood tall beside her. "It's measured in the principles and values that guide our choices across generations. This center honors those consistent threads that connect us to our past and inform our future." After the ceremony, as community members enjoyed refreshments and continued exploring the exhibits, Elena found a quiet moment to step outside into the autumn sunshine. The farm stretched before her, the fields well maintained, the outbuildings repaired, the entire property reflecting the care that financial stability had made possible. But the physical improvements represented only the most visible aspect of their transformation. Professor Mercer joined her, holding 2 cups of cider from the refreshment table. "You should be immensely proud," he said, handing her one of the cups. "Not just of this center, but of what you've built for your family." Elena smiled, accepting both the cider and the compliment. "It's not what I imagined when I first found that map, that's for certain. I was just thinking about fixing the roof and paying the property taxes." "The best journeys often begin with practical necessities," Mercer observed. "It's what we discover along the way that transforms them into something meaningful." Elena nodded, watching as Chloe guided a group of elderly visitors through the exhibition on World War II's impact on rural communities. Her daughter moved with confident knowledge, connecting personal stories shared by the visitors to the broader historical context displayed in photographs and artifacts. The shy 13-year-old, who had feared losing her family home, had blossomed into a poised young woman with clear purpose and direction. Nearby, Mason was demonstrating an interactive exhibit he had helped design, explaining to younger children how farm equipment had evolved in response to changing national needs during wartime production efforts. His natural mechanical aptitude had found expression in creating hands-on learning experiences that made historical connections accessible to various age groups. "They've found their places in the story," Elena remarked, pride evident in her voice, not just as recipients of an unexpected inheritance, but as active participants in preserving and sharing something meaningful. "That's your influence," Mercer assured her. "You showed them that discovery brings responsibility, to understand, to preserve, to share appropriately. Those are values that will serve them well, regardless of what careers they ultimately pursue." Later that evening, after the last visitors had departed and the cleanup volunteers had gone home, Elena sat with her children on the farmhouse porch, watching fireflies rise from the fields in the gathering dusk. These quiet moments together had become a family tradition, a time to reflect and connect without the pressures of daily tasks and obligations. "Do you think Grandpa and Dad would have liked the Heritage Center?" Mason asked, leaning against the porch railing with the lanky awkwardness of early adolescence. Eleanor considered the question carefully. "I think they would have appreciated the purpose behind it, the commitment to preserving important stories and connecting people to their shared history. Your grandfather understood the value of institutional memory, and your father always believed in community service." "I wish they could have seen it," Chloe said softly, "especially the military service exhibit. Mr. Peterson actually cried when he saw his unit's patch in the display case." "That's because recognition matters," Elena explained. "When someone acknowledges the significance of your service or sacrifice, it validates the choices you've made and the values that guided them." This understanding had shaped Elena's approach to the Heritage Center from its conception, creating space for recognition of contributions that might otherwise be forgotten, from agricultural innovations to military service to the uncelebrated work of maintaining family farms through difficult economic periods. The map discovery had taught her the power of acknowledgement, both financial and historical, and she had incorporated that lesson into every aspect of the center's development. As darkness settled over the farm, the family retreated inside to the room that still housed their private collection, the reproduction of the Shadow Watch map, Colonel Reeves's service photographs, and the growing archive of declassified materials that documented his contributions to national security. This space remained separate from the Public Heritage Center, preserving the personal connection to their family history. Elena carefully opened the folder Director Harlow had provided earlier that day, spreading the newly declassified documents on the table where the children could examine them. The materials included historical photographs of early detection stations, technical diagrams with sensitive elements redacted, and a formal recognition of Colonel Robert Reeves's role in modernizing security protocols during the satellite era. "Look at this," Chloe exclaimed, pointing to a group photograph dated 1979. "Is that Grandpa with the presidential science advisors?" Elena leaned closer, recognizing her father-in-law standing among a group of distinguished-looking men in the Oval Office. "It appears so. The caption identifies him as the military liaison to the President's Scientific Advisory Committee on Detection Systems." "So he briefed the President?" Mason asked, clearly impressed by this revelation. "At least indirectly," Elena confirmed. "This shows how significant his contributions were, trusted at the highest levels of government during a critical period in the Cold War." As they continued exploring the documents, Elena was struck by how differently they approached this material, now compared to their initial discovery 3 years earlier. What had once seemed merely mysterious and potentially valuable had become meaningful in a much deeper sense, connecting them to a legacy of service and expertise that shaped their understanding of themselves as a family. The financial security provided by the agreement with the Department of Energy had resolved their immediate practical concerns, but the ongoing process of discovery had given them something far more valuable, a sense of purpose and connection that transcended material considerations. Each newly declassified document added dimension to their understanding of Colonel Reeves's work, helping them see their own place in a continuing story of responsibility and stewardship. Director Harlow mentioned a scholarship program for security studies, Elena told them, watching their reactions carefully. She suggested you both might be strong candidates when the time comes, given your family connection to this history. Chloe's expression brightened with immediate interest. That could be perfect for what I want to study, the evolution of information security protocols across different historical contexts. Mason looked more thoughtful. I'm still more interested in the mechanical engineering side of things, but I guess security systems need engineers too, right? Every field has security dimensions, Elena assured him. The important thing is finding where your natural interests and abilities can contribute something meaningful. This philosophy had guided Elena's own career decisions since the map. Discovery, leading her to complete additional education that expanded her teaching credentials while developing the Heritage Center as a community resource. Rather than dramatically changing course, she had deepened her commitment to education while applying it in broader contexts: classroom teaching, historical preservation, and community engagement. The following morning, Elena rose early, as was her habit, brewing coffee and stepping onto the porch to watch the sunrise illuminate the Heritage Center's new sign. The previous day's celebration had marked an important milestone, but the daily rhythms of farm life continued. Animals needed tending, buildings required maintenance, and the land itself demanded consistent attention. These ongoing responsibilities had kept the family grounded through their transition from financial struggle to security, providing continuity of purpose even as their circumstances improved. Elena had deliberately maintained many of their pre-discovery routines, believing that the values of hard work, responsibility, and careful stewardship remained essential regardless of financial status. As she sipped her coffee, she noticed Walter's car approaching along the driveway, unusually early even for the former military man. His expression as he emerged from the vehicle suggested he came with purpose, rather than for a casual visit. "I hope I'm not intruding at this hour," he greeted her, accepting the offer of coffee with a nod of thanks. "There's something I wanted to discuss with you privately before the children are awake." Elena led him to the kitchen table, concerned by his serious demeanor. "Is everything all right, Walter?" "Perfectly fine," he assured her, setting down a slim leather portfolio he had brought with him. "But yesterday's events prompted me to finalize something I've been considering for some time." He opened the portfolio and removed a legal document. "This is the formal establishment of the Reeves-Simmons Legacy Trust." Eleanor looked at him questioningly. "I don't understand." "I have no children of my own," Walter explained gently. "And after reconnecting with your family, I've come to see Chloe and Mason as the appropriate inheritors of certain aspects of my estate, particularly materials related to my work with their grandfather." The document outlined the creation of a trust that would provide additional educational funding for the children, while preserving Walter's collection of historical materials related to his military service. Most surprisingly, it included provision for transferring ownership of his mountain cabin property to the Reeves family upon his passing. "Walter, this is incredibly generous, but—" Elena began, overwhelmed by the unexpected gesture. He raised a hand to gently interrupt. "Before you object, this isn't merely generosity, it's appropriate stewardship. Robert and I acquired that property specifically because of its historical significance. It's built near the site of one of the original Shadow Watch monitoring stations." This revelation stunned Elena into momentary silence. "One of the 7 stations marked on the map." Walter nodded. "The highest elevation point, designated as Station Alpha in the original documentation. When the physical station was decommissioned, Robert and I purchased the surrounding acreage to ensure it wouldn't be developed inappropriately. We built the cabin as a retreat, but also as a form of historical preservation." "You never mentioned this connection," Elena said, trying to absorb the implications. "It seemed prudent to maintain some separation between your family's situation and my personal property," Walter explained. "But seeing the Heritage Center yesterday clarified something for me. You understand the balance between preservation and purposeful use better than anyone else I might designate as a steward for that property." The trust document outlined specific provisions for maintaining the historical integrity of the property while allowing for its use as a family retreat and potential research site. Like the map reproduction agreement, it represented a thoughtful balance between preservation and practical application, protecting important historical context while recognizing the needs of those entrusted with its care. "This completes the circle, in a way," Walter continued. "The map you discovered showed the 7 stations that protected Manhattan's development. Now your family will be stewards of one of those actual locations, preserving its history while creating new purpose for it." As the morning light strengthened, casting long shadows across the kitchen table where they sat, Elena felt the weight of this new responsibility settling alongside the sense of rightness it carried. Their journey had begun with the accidental discovery of a historical document that connected them to national security history. Now they were being entrusted with physical stewardship of a site that had played an active role in that history. "I don't know what to say, Walter," she finally managed, genuine emotion making her voice unsteady. "You don't need to say anything," he assured her. "Just continue doing what you've already demonstrated such aptitude for, balancing respect for the past with creation of meaningful future purpose." When Chloe and Mason awoke later that morning, Eleanor gathered them in the family museum room to share Walter's revelation and generous provision. Their reactions reflected their developing characters, Chloe immediately asking about historical documentation of the station, while Mason wanted to know about the cabin's structure and surrounding terrain. "This means we're connected to the map in an even more direct way," Chloe observed, her academic mind making immediate connections. "We're not just inheritors of the document, but caretakers of part of the actual system it described." Mason approached the framed map reproduction, studying it with renewed interest. "Which station is it? Can we identify the exact location?" Elena pointed to the highest elevation marker on the map, one of the 7 X's that had initially caught her attention in the attic 3 years earlier. According to Walter, this was Station Alpha, the primary relay point for the entire detection network. The children exchanged excited glances, already imagining explorations of the site and integration of this new information into their understanding of their grandfather's work. Their enthusiasm reflected how thoroughly they had embraced their family's unexpected connection to history, seeing it not as a burden of secrecy, but as an opportunity for meaningful engagement and purposeful stewardship. As they discussed plans to visit the cabin site the following weekend, Elena was struck by how perfectly this new development aligned with the principles that had guided their decisions since the map's discovery. From the initial negotiation with the Department of Energy to the development of the Heritage Center, they had consistently sought balance between preservation and purposeful use, between honoring the past and creating meaningful future possibilities. Walter's unexpected gift represented both culmination and continuation of that journey, acknowledging how far they had come while opening new pathways for exploration and responsibility. The map that had once represented potential financial salvation had become something far more significant, a guide to understanding their place in a continuing story of service, stewardship, and purposeful legacy. Standing in the family museum room with her children, surrounded by the tangible connections to their heritage, Elena felt a profound sense of gratitude for the leaking roof that had sent her into the attic on that ordinary October day 3 years earlier. What had begun as a desperate search for financial solutions had evolved into a transformative journey of discovery, not just of historical artifacts, but of purpose, principle, and profound connection across generations. The Reeves family's path forward would continue to balance preservation with progress, respect for the past with creation of new possibilities. In that balanced approach, they had found not just security, but meaningful engagement with something larger than themselves, a legacy worth preserving and a future worth building together. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.